Thanks for listening to the Mornings with Carmen LaBerge podcast, made available thanks to support from listeners just like you.
Your daily encouragement that God has the world in the hollow of his hand. This is Mornings with Carmen LaBerge on Faith Radio.
If we're gonna fly, we fly like eagles, arms held wide. If we're gonna fear, we fear no evil. We will rise. By your power we will go. By your spirit we are bold. If we're gonna stand, we stand as giants. If we're gonna walk, we walk as lions.
Hey, what time is it? Like literally, what time is it? Are you in Central Time, Mountain Time, Eastern Time, Atlantic Time, Aleutian Hawaiian Time? Sally is checking in from Kodiak, Alaska, and she's like, hey, you missed me out here in Alaska time. Yeah, good morning, Sally. Can you like see bears from your window? Like I have my mental image of Kodiak, Alaska is that you look out the window and you see bears. I don't know if that's true, but I kind of hope so. So Sally, good morning in Kodiak, Alaska. What time is it where you live? As soon as we start talking about time, it, yes, is always slipping into the future for those of you who just thought of that as I said it. But what time is it? What time is it? When will we arrive at the fullness of time? That is the question that immediately comes to my mind. Like, today's the day the Lord has made, but is today also the day that Jesus is coming back? Like, is it possible that, like, we're going to arrive at that time today when all time changes? Not just, like, time changes from daylight savings to, what do we call it? Ordinary time? I don't know. Just basic
standard time.
Standard
time, yeah.
You know, Paul, I need help because sometimes I've been drawn into an idea that I have no notes on, and so I'm just like wandering around in my own wilderness of thought. So that's where we have arrived this morning, because Sally got me thinking about all the people that are living in time zones that I don't think about. And I am so appreciative that Sally is here this morning. I don't know. Is it even bright and early in Alaska time? Because this time of year, it's possible that it is, I don't know. Is it bright and early yet? You know, the closer you get to June the 21st, it's always bright and early in Alaska, that's super fun, right? All right. So what time is it? What time is it in terms of the redemptive arc of history? We have those people that have that doomsday clock and they're like, oh, we're like ticking a half second towards midnight. They don't know. They don't know. And Jesus didn't know. Jesus, he's asked, like, when is this fullness of time business going to be happening? When are you coming back? When is the second coming? What time is that in human history? And Jesus is like, look, I don't know. There's all kinds of signs you could be looking for. Can you even read the signs of the times in which you live? There are people in the Old Testament who are described as being able to read the signs of the times, and the sons of Ishtakar. And we want to be like that. We want to be able to read the signs of the times in which we live. And so what time is it? What time is it in American history? What time of life is this for you? What season are you in? You and I each get, I don't know, on average, something like, I'm probably going to say this wrong. Again, I just do my research. How many days of life does the average person get? I was going to say that it's like 29,000, but we're going to ask Google. 27,375. See, I was going to give you a little boost. I was going to make 29,000. So where are you? I mean, in that ticking of time, if you and I, on average, you're going to get 27,375 days. Like, what time is that? I mean, I'm half past time, I guess, is the way that I'd be thinking about that. So when you think about the time that you have today, make every second count. Make every minute count. Certainly make every hour count. And good Lord, make every day count. This is the day the Lord has made. How are you literally spending the one thing we're not getting any more of? time in this life to share the good news of the gospel with other people. That's it. Once you get to heaven, one of the things that you're not going to have the privilege of doing, because there will be no need of it, is the proclamation of the gospel. Because everybody who's going to be in the kingdom of heaven is, it's going to be populated by people who during this lifetime, during this time on earth, were exposed to and positively responded to the invitation of God to receive his grace in the person of Jesus Christ. Time is short for that, for the proclamation of the gospel, for the salvation of humankind. So how are you spending your time today? If you're spending it on any lesser thing, anything of lesser influence in the lives of other people, if you're spending time talking with people about anything less than an eternal conversation about where they're going to spend all the time in all eternity. Yeah, I know. There's all kinds of conversations we could be having about time. This I know. It is slipping right now away. And so when we talk about making every moment count, when we talk about making every minute count, every hour count, every day count, it's all to the glory of God. All of it. So spend some time today, some of the time that God has given you. It's a gift, by the way. This day is a gift to you from God. He's the creator and the giver of it. He would love to spend it with you. Are you going to spend some time with God today? Are you going to spend all your time with God today, actually? Moment by moment, step by step, breath by breath, word by word. Everything that you've got going on today, God is right there with you. Do you recognize that he is sovereign over all time and all space, and you in the midst of the time that he has granted? How are you going to make the most of the time that God has given you today? Have the time of your life today, spending it with the Lord of life. Few reflections on time spontaneously here at the outset of the hour. And yes, I too am thinking about friends half a world away and what time it is on the other side of the world or in the other hemisphere. So thank you for those of you who are recognizing that we do, because of the podcast and digital media, we have listeners in 170 countries around the world. And so, it's time there. It's like tomorrow already in some places. I don't know. It's a crazy thing, the way time works. But here's what I know. God has given you this day, this hour, this moment to live as you will to his glory. And so I'm going to encourage you to give God the time that he has given you today to use you to reach others, that they might, in the fullness of time, live all time in his presence. When were those pivot points in your life when you had an aha moment or when you were crushingly brought to your knees? What are those pivot points? What are those moments? And who were the people who walked with you into and through some of those moments? Each one of our stories of a walk with God and transformation in Christ, each one of our stories could be told as a part of somebody else's story. So how would your mom tell your story of conversion and coming to Christ and how she prayed for you before it? Or how would your spouse tell your story of who you were before you knew Jesus and then who you are now as a growing disciple in him? Or how would your friends, how would the people who used to work with you and those things that you used to do in your prior life, how would they tell your story? We're going to give Joshua Broome an opportunity to tell his own story, but his story is influenced certainly by the faithfulness and the walk of others as well. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how all of our stories are knit together in one story, the greatest story being the story of Jesus, who brings us from lives that are going nowhere to lives that are full and redeemed. 7 lies that will ruin your life. Joshua Broome joins us next to talk about his journey from porn star to preacher and what he learned along the way about the truth that sets us free. You're listening to Mornings with Carmen. Let me just go ahead and tell you, you're going to want to connect with him, Joshua Broome. Joshua Broome, and Broome has an E on the end, .me, joshuabroome.me. Joshua, welcome to Mornings with Carmen.
Good morning, Carmen. It is so great to be with you.
Your story is crazy, except that your story is, a Jesus-y story, and so those are all pretty crazy. You also acknowledge that
Right.
it's God's story and not your story. And I might be tempted, other people might have been tempted over time to like reduce it all into one sentence. And so I'll reduce it into one sentence, and then you can laughingly say, "Oh yeah, that is that is a gross over reduction of a story that has taken a lifetime to write." So Joshua was at one point in history an adult film star, might be one way of describing it. A porn star might be another way. Jesus recovered him. He got saved. He became a pastor. There is a lot going on there. And so I want to give you the time and the space to tell your story.
Yeah. What a story it is. And I think, um, each and every person has a story, and vulnerability is always the best way to connectivity. And when we share our stories, we can allow people to see that God was not only with us in our worst moments, but He has a future that is good for us. And if we surrender our lives to Him, He will exceed our hopes, our dreams, and our imaginations. But yeah, so I grew up in a small town in South Carolina. I grew up without a dad, and that's a normative thing, unfortunately, in this culture. But what was unique about my story was that my dad was in the small town that I grew up in, and I didn't have access to a relationship with him. So I thought,
Mm.
I could uh, create my own autonomy. I could be my own savior. And the way that I wanted to do that was I thought if I became enough, I would feel like I was enough. And that started with, academics and sports. And it was the next thing after the next thing. And that led me into living that way in high school, living that way in college. And then I moved out to Hollywood and started acting and modeling when I was around 13 years old, had more success modeling than acting. But I was, doing okay in that space, making enough to make a living, had an agent, all that good stuff. And I met three girls that were in the porn industry, and they were essentially headhunters. And they asked me, "Hey, do you want to meet with our agent?" And their agent asked me three questions when I agreed to meet with him. He asked me, how did I grow up? What was I doing in LA? And what did I hope to accomplish? And I said, well, I grew up pretty much just me and my mom. So ammunition for someone who's wanting to manipulate you is like, okay, you come from a broken home. You're in LA chasing something like a lot of people are in that creative space. And then interestingly enough, I said I wanted to be famous. And I think that's such an interesting thing because famous is vague. It's not, it's not
Mm.
tangible. It's not, there's no metric attached to it. And if you're pursuing something that is somewhat fictitious, what you'll find is you'll never find it. And what I was really saying when I said I wanted to be famous is I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to be known. And he promised me a counterfeit version of the dream that I was actually pursuing. And I, you know, naively agreed to do one of these films, believing that it wouldn't impact my life in the way that it did. But you know, being someone who's from a small town, it only takes one person to know one thing about your life for everyone to know everything about your life. So people in my hometown find out what I'm doing. My agent finds out what I'm doing. And then that leads to me feeling a lot of shame and disconnect from my family, not because of them, just because of the way shame works and how I felt. And then I got, essentially fired from any kind of representation that I had on the mainstream front. And then I believed, okay, well, I made this decision. I made my bed, so I might as well lie in it. And while I'm there, I might as well, achieve the success, the fame, the notoriety that I believed that would mitigate the wound that I had in my heart. And I was really searching for the feeling of, son, I'm proud of you.
Hmm.
And I thought if I heard enough good jobs and got enough high fives and got enough commas in my bank account that would feel the same, even though I knew it was different.
So
And
Joshua, yeah, so let me just
yeah,
reset for folks who might just be joining us. We're talking with Joshua Broome. He's a pastor today, and we're going to arrive at the really significant pivot point in his life. Maybe Joshua, I'll do a little bit of a fast forward here.
sure,
You
sure.
end up with a lot of commas in the bank account. You end up
Yeah,
at the very top of your industry, more than a thousand uh, productions to your credit. Um, you are a very, very accomplished person in your field, much sought after. But there's a night when you're going to be honored as, literally the person at the very, very top of your industry, the pinnacle of your career. You weren't even there to receive the award. You didn't show up at the show. Why?
yeah. I think there's a lot of people probably listening to this thinking that if you had a different job, you would feel a different way. If you had the relationship, you wouldn't feel lonely. If you had the marriage, your porn addiction would fade away. If you had something, that it would fix something. And I thought, well, if enough people thought enough of me, I would feel like I was enough. And when I won that award and it didn't make me feel like I thought it would, it crushed me. And not only did I not want to go to the award show, I didn't want to live anymore, because I was so sure that if I won that award, which meant that I was the best in that field, that I would feel good about myself. And when it didn't work, it amplified my anxiety and it deepened my depression to the extent that I made a very clear, thought out plan to take my life.
Mm. We're going to take a very brief break. And when we come back, we're going to let Joshua tell us the rest of his story, because obviously God picked up and redeemed his life in some very dramatic ways. There are a number of people who could be telling this story from their vantage point. Joshua's mom could be telling this story. His wife could be telling this story. A woman, a teller at a bank who asked a particularly penetrating question at just the right time, could be telling this story if she knew that God used her in a moment on a particular day. So you have no idea how God might use you today in the life of a person who's really, really struggling out there. Joshua's going to walk us further into his story. And let me just tell you that this is a story of redemption, and God has that for you today as well. You're listening to Mornings with Carmen. Back when I was in college, I invited a friend to church. Now, she had literally never been in a church before. So I tried to think of all the things that it would help to explain. We got there early and I showed her around. We got a bulletin. I told her what to expect. But when the offering basket actually came by, she held on to it, looked down, and asked out loud, "What is this?" Now, I want you to imagine trying to explain that during worship while the soloist is singing. Now, what makes this story really funny is that she held the basket. I mean, she was asking an honest question and I was honestly trying to answer. But she's holding the basket and the ushers are getting antsy. And because I had passed the basket to her, I couldn't easily take it back. So there we sat. I'm attempting to explain the collection of tithes and offerings. My friend is holding the basket. The person on the other side of her is wide-eyed, boring a hole into me. It's funny now, but I literally feel the sweat that was rolling down my back in that moment. Explaining why we support a ministry can be challenging. This is listener-supported radio and listener-supported digital media. You're listening to it via podcast, so that's made possible by the financial support of listeners just like you. During our spring fundraiser, we pass the plate. In short, we need your help. If you've never given before, maybe you could consider $1 a day. It's not actually about the size of the gift. It's about everyone doing their part to make the whole thing possible. So help us continue to share the faith by sharing in faith now. You can give right now by clicking the link in the show notes, by going to myfaithradio.com, or texting the word give to 877-933-2484. And thanks in advance. This could be a story that started something like this. A porn star walks into a bank. A desperate guy walks into a gym. A girl and a boy take a walk. A new believer walks into a church. A new man walks down an aisle. A pastor walks his faith into the world. Those could all be chapters in the story of Joshua Broome. He is a pastor. His book is entitled Seven Lies That Will Ruin Your Life: What My Journey from Porn Star to Preacher Taught Me About the Truth That Sets Us Free. Joshua, thank you again for being here to share your story with us. Maybe do this. Get us to what you view as the pivot point. Obviously, you quit the porn industry. You end up moving back to North Carolina. You got to get a job.
Yeah.
You are a guy who has a bit of a physique, and so fitness seems like a good fit. You walk into a gym, you get a job. Eventually, you meet a girl. Is that
Yeah.
too
I mean,
fast of a summary? Like, right? That's like, I
well,
know, like, I
I would
gotta
say,
accelerate through parts. It's crazy.
yeah. Well, I would say, I had an Act 16 moment where, there was an earthquake and there was a Roman jailer that was going to take his own life. And Paul simply said, "Hey, don't harm yourself. I'm right here." And someone did that for
Mm.
me. Someone saw me in the middle of my brokenness and say, "Hey, I see you." And they simply said my name, and it changed the trajectory of my life. And so instead of taking
That's
my
the
life,
crazy,
I
but
ran.
that's the bank. So that's the bank teller.
Yeah, that's the bank teller. The bank
Like,
teller,
that's
um, you know,
crazy. Like, when I
yeah,
think about that, the power of somebody seeing your name on a document and then
yeah,
probably saying something that, she'd been trained to say their first name and
yeah,
then ask how you can help them. And she's like,
yeah.
Joshua, how can I help you today?
Yeah, but I just want to highlight, so it wasn't as arbitrary of a moment, because like the transaction was over and I had the receipt and I was walking away. So she saw me
Right?
in,
Mm,
like,
mm,
I'm moments away from taking my life. So I'm like, cold sweats, pale, all this stuff. And she
mm,
stopped me and said, "Joshua, are you okay? How can I help you?"
mm.
Um, like that was the moment that, instead of taking my life
Amen.
that day, I ran for my life. And then the one thing that I had in my back pocket that I could make money is I had a certification to coach, to personal train. And I started doing that, but same mentality. I thought if I put enough good dirt on my bad dirt, I wouldn't feel dirty. Right. I tried to manage
Mm,
the perception other people saw of me. So I thought if I was doing a good thing, I would feel like a good person. And the wounds of my past came with me. And 2 years, so this is, I've left the industry for 2 years now. So 2 years of me working in the industry, this girl walks in this gym. I ask her out and she says no a couple of times, but I'm persistent. And she agrees to go on a walk with me. And on that walk, I'm like, "Hey, I'm tired of lying to people. I'm tired to withholding the truth and getting found out. I'm just tired of this." Because I'm, my worst mistakes are one Google search away. So I continue to live that way. So I'm just like, "Hey, I'm just going to be upfront with her. I'm just going to tell her, and then she's not going to want anything to do with me." So I give her a 5 minute monologue of how bad I am and a list of all the bad things I've done, because I was certain that's who I was. And she listens and she asks me, "Hey, are you doing those things now?" I said, "No, it's been about 2 years since I left that industry." And she says, "Well, guess what? You are not defined by the worst thing you've ever done. And you're not defined by the greatest thing you'll ever do. There's a God that exists outside of time, space, and matter that created everything, including me and you. And he has the final say. Do you know him?"
mm.
And I thought I did, but I didn't. And she shared with me her faith. And then we walked and talked. And then a week later, 9 years ago, she invites me to this church, and I hear this sermon on Second Samuel chapter 9. And I was Mephibosheth looking at David with the grace that was being offered from him, the loving kindness of God being offered to him. And Mephibosheth responds to this grace of his grandfather's land being restored to him, and David inviting him into his kingdom. And Mephibosheth, Second Samuel chapter 9 verse 8, he responds as, "Who am don't you know who I am? I'm but a dead dog." And that's how I felt. I thought, okay, the gospel is true, but haven't I disqualified myself from the gospel? And then the pastor made it clear, no. And then he shared Hebrews 12:2, where it was with joy that was set before him that Jesus endured the cross. So not only was he completely obedient to the Father, being perfectly, him being fully God, fully man, but he did it with love in his heart for his father and for you and for me. God loved me. And when I understood God loved me in spite of myself, Romans 5:8, when we were, at our worst, we were enemies of God with, the worst thing that you could think of that you've ever done. God knew that and saw you and said, my love for you is greater than anything you've ever done. And I willingly, with joy in my heart, go to the cross because I love you that much. When I understood that was true and that was real, his love arrested me. And I fell to my knees and wept and surrendered my life to the one who made me. And that person that I went on the walk with, her name is Hope. And that is my wife today. We've been married for 8 years. We've got 4 boys. And someone discipled me. Someone walked with me 3 days after I gave my life to Christ. Someone started teaching me how to read the Bible, teaching me how to study the Bible. And then I went to Liberty University and studied Christian ministries and biblical theology. And I just love the part of my story where God kept me in isolation. I didn't share my story for years because he healed me and he equipped me with the 1 Peter 3:15 that we all need to have. Because when people, about 3 years ago, when Tucker Carlson had me on Fox and I spoke to 4.2 million people live, really for the first time on a big platform, he asked me, how did I go from being the most successful porn actor in 2012 to 5 years later, 6 years later, preaching the Bible? How did I do that? It's like, man, what a great question to ask, and the answer is the gospel. That we've all that we all fall short because of our sin, and that sin equates to death. But the good news is that Jesus came, lived the life that we couldn't live, died the death that we deserved, and he rose again, solidifying he is indeed, in fact, the Messiah, the one who takes away the sins in the world. If you put your faith in him, your life will be changed. You will be made new, and you're not only saved from something, but you're saved for something. And that's what the book is about. It's eradicating lies that we've believed, that we create a worldview out of, and that the world actually propagates. Romans 12:2 talks about we're either being conformed by the world or being transformed by the renewing of our mind. That's important as the verse goes on, so that we can discern what is God's good, pleasing, and perfect will. There is a good, pleasing, and perfect will that God provides us because he's a good father. He lays out wisdom for us to live in. There's a plan and a purpose for our life. And if we live in that plan and we thrive in that purpose using the gifts that he's given us, that is where satisfaction is found. That is where purpose is found. And that is where peace is found. And all the things that you're searching for at the end of the day, the things that keep you up late at night, God is not withholding them for you. He's waiting for you to come to him and wants those things for you.
I'm just going to be greedy and ask you to come back because we're out of time today, but we didn't get through like even a third of my questions. Would you be willing to continue this conversation with us? Okay, fantastic.
I would love to.
So fantastic. So Joshua Broome is going to come back and talk with us again. His book is 7 Lies That Will Ruin Your Life. But I know that one of the things that you're hearing is the joy of his salvation. I know that you are that you're hearing the way that God has sown scripture into his heart and mind. And so we want to have those conversations with Joshua in the future. And one of the things I just want to highlight as you're listening right now is that guy whose actions and films are just a Google search away, that guy is dead. That guy is dead. And I hope that you have met today Joshua Broome, son of God, redeemed in Christ, brother in Christ, husband of hope, father of 4, shepherd of many, because he is equipped to walk with you and with me out of whatever shame is trapping us in a dead life, because Joshua is walking in newness of life. So Joshua Broome, thank you so much for joining us. You're listening to Mornings with Carmen. I'm Carmen LaBerge. Absolutely. And this is Faith Radio. What's your story and how good are you at telling your story? Storytelling is something that Karen Swallow Pryor certainly appreciates. We know her as many, many things. I love and know her as an author and as a person who teaches us to appreciate literature. She writes frequently, including at places like the Gospel Coalition. You can find her at KarenSwallowPrior.com. Karen, good morning. Welcome back to Mornings with Carmen.
Good morning, Carmen. It's been a while.
I know. Where are you? What's your big fancy title now? Like, I should probably have a really beautifully written introduction for you.
Oh, no, no, no. No, I'm just writing and speaking now, and even a little bit of a homemaker. So
I
you can
love
call me
that.
that.
Well, and you're a dog mom. I know that you are a dog mom, and so talk with us. So you have dogs.
Yes.
Who are they? What do you love about them? And aren't they people?
Well, first of all, I do not call myself a dog mom, but I have two beloved dogs, Ruby and Eva. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, you will see lots of pictures of them. They are a Weimaraner and a German short-haired pointer. And have had dogs all my life. These are the two that we have now. I also have chickens, but they have no names.
We have chickens. Some of them have names, and sometimes just because a chicken looks a certain way, it then has the same name as the other chicken that looks like that. Because
Oh,
right?
that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Who can? So yeah. So whenever we have a chicken that's even marginally black, her name is Barbara. I don't know why, but all of our barred rocks and all of the chickens of any, yeah, they're all named Barbara. And we now have a rehomed rooster who we desperately needed, and his name is oh goodness, Midnight the Magnificent.
Wow.
I haven't had him
Wow.
haven't had him hardly long enough to know his name, but there you go. Talk with us about what you and I both read in Religion News, which is the development or advent of an animal chaplain, which which elevates animals to the status of human beings, and that doesn't really elevate animals. That really diminishes who people are as image bearers of the living God. And so you have a piece at the Gospel Coalition, Pets Aren't People. Can you just lead us into that conversation? Because there are people who think their pets are people.
Mm. Yeah, so it's there's so many nuances to this issue, and I want to get back to the animal chaplaincy because I actually don't see it so much as ministering to the animals as to the people who love those animals and often are being ministered to in the grieving process. And I have a lot to say about grieving over animals, but the first thing that I would say is the title of the article that you mentioned I just wrote. Pets aren't people. They are not people. And I am, as we've already established, I am very much an animal lover. I'm passionate about my dogs and animals and animal care. And yet I think that recognizing that they are not people, that they are what they are, that dogs are dogs and cats are cats, and loving them in what they are, including what they aren't, is actually the best way to love not just animals but anything for what they are, what they were made for, what their purpose is. And it's not loving to love any person or anything else for what it's not. So that's my philosophical, theological point of view. But we can get down to brass tacks and what that looks like if you like.
Yeah, no, I think that would be really good. What does it practically look like? I mean, is there? I guess one of the things I tend to recognize is that people can, in some ways, replace the relationships that we are to have with one another as human beings with animals. And there, you do talk about, you do talk a little bit about that. There is a distinction between human beings and animals, and there is a proper ordering of love.
Right, right. And I hear that said that people replace other people with animals, and it's certainly true that we can give and receive affection to our pets and from our pets, and that we can channel perhaps some of our maternal or paternal instincts into the care for our pets. But I don't know if people set out to do that on purpose, or if animals really just provide solace, perhaps for those who have not been able to find someone to marry, or have not been able to have children, or have not been able to even, because of economic structures and systems, been able to buy a home, or create a lifestyle that could include children. There are lots of reasons, lots of things, roles that pets play in our lives, but I don't know that I think they serve more as solace for what we don't have than replacement for what we might want. But just a more practical example of how pets are not people is something I've gone through in the past year, is just being attacked by a dog in the neighborhood, bitten, and getting severe injuries. And yeah, this is a common thing in the world, and yet there are so many people who, when a dog harms a person, will put the dog first by not rehoming the dog to a place that can handle it better, or euthanizing the dog, or doing whatever it takes to protect people. I think that's a very vivid example of the sort of disordered love of not protecting people just because of our affection for an animal.
Yeah, I'm thinking about Harambe, the gorilla, and the debate that took place in the culture when a toddler fell into the gorilla enclosure. And there was a very, very public and open debate about, whether or not it was right to kill the gorilla. When it was there's lots of kids. There aren't many gorillas, was the argument. And I thought to myself, we have arrived at, we've arrived at an interesting point in human history when we can say that can be said out loud, and not everyone simultaneously would say, no, that's not right.
Right.
That small human being has greater value than that giant gorilla. And so human beings seen as the threat versus human beings seen as the stewards of all that God has made. And I do think the stewardship issue is an important one. And I think you begin to till that soil in my mind when you're talking about the way that we relate to animals and the role that they play in our lives and how much solace we do get. I have great affection for my dogs, but I do have greater affection for one dog than others. That's not true when it comes to kids, right? It's when we think about and dogs come and go. I could run down just like you could, like the litany of dogs I have loved over the course of my life, and yet I don't live in some sort of grief related to them. I'm able to recognize that they're given. I got to be a steward and a manager of their lives and enjoy them thoroughly. And now they're not here anymore. And, there's other things happening. So I just think that it's helpful to have these conversations because not everyone has a rightly ordered relationship with their pets. And so can we talk in just a moment, just very directly about something specific that I'm trying to figure out how to talk about with a friend. She has invested many tens of thousands of dollars in the cancer treatment of her dog. And I mean, her dog is going to die. Dogs don't live as long as people. Her dog is going to die. And I view this stewardship of the resources being invested in this animal as not faithful. And so you can help me, that maybe I could help her. Could you help me think through that in a minute?
Sure, I'm happy to. That's a tough one.
Yeah. Karen Swallow Prior is here. I like the way she thinks. I like the things she's thinking about. She blogs at The Priory. You can find her at karenswallowprior.com. We're talking about a sensitive topic today. Pets aren't people is her piece at the Gospel Coalition. We're also going to back into a conversation about chaplains There are people who are now serving as animal chaplains, which is a little bit distinct from people who are serving as chaplains to people when they lose an animal. So we'll make some of those distinctions next. You're listening to Mornings with Carmen. As we consider the life of Jesus and the life of the first generation of Christians, reading here the book of Acts and all the letters to the Christians in the New Testament, we see people who wake up. They come to see and understand and then receive Jesus as their Savior and Lord. And it changes everything. We see Christians then telling other people about the good news and inviting them to respond in repentance, be baptized, and follow Jesus. The movement of Christianity grows person by person and then exponentially as people walking in darkness receive the light of Christ and want others to know what they know and have what they have. Well, you and I are living in dark days. People need light. And Jesus is the light of the world today in the same way that he was the light of the world at the beginning of creation and at the first Christmas and throughout his life on earth and in his radiance now at the right hand of the Father. Jesus is the light of the world. So if you're walking in darkness of any kind today, I invite you to consider Jesus. If you'd like to know more about what it means to begin a relationship with Christ or to chat with someone about it, just text the word faith to 41224. Who is your neighbor? How are you to love your neighbor? How are you to love your neighbor as yourself? Is there a quality of love that God intends for us to demonstrate and show to other human beings? Is some of that being siphoned off into ways in which we are investing in our pets today? And is that something that as stewards, as Christians, we ought to be examining, as hard as it might be? Karen Swallow Pryor is here with us today. She's written a piece for the Gospel Coalition called Pets Aren't People. We're also going to take up a conversation about chaplains. Some of them are actually serving, in their view, the needs of animals, but other chaplains are serving the needs of people who are in grief over the loss of their animals. And so we're going to talk with Karen about that. Karen, again, thank you so much for being here and just wandering around with me in this subject matter area. I really appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
Okay, so I have a friend. I don't mind saying that she absolutely has dogs as substitutes for children. I mean, it's true of her. She'd probably admit it herself if I were to straight up ask her that. She has invested an extraordinary amount of financial resources in the care of one particular dog who is terminally ill with cancer. But she continues to pour financial investment into the life of this dog. Can you just help me from a worldview perspective and Christian sister? How are some ways I might engage with that?
Well, without knowing all of the details, it's hard for me to say, but some general principles are that, that if when we take on the responsibility of an animal, it is a huge responsibility. And I see more people who don't take that responsibility seriously and treat dogs as lawn ornaments or temporary possessions. And that's not good stewardship. It's in terms of how much money is being spent. I don't know how much money she has, so I don't know if that it's poor stewardship in that respect. And people might spend $10,000 on a family vacation for a week or two, and perhaps she would rather spend that money on the life of her dog. And I would do that even if I had that kind of money. But I think more important questions are, why is she doing this for herself, or is she doing this for the dog who is benefiting? And so we do have that role and that responsibility to care well for animals, and sometimes trying to prolong their lives without a quality of life is not the right thing to do. But I think that's the bigger question to ask, is what is the responsible, loving thing to do for this animal that I'm responsible for?
Do all dogs go to heaven?
That is a fun and interesting and hard question. I of course, we know a couple of things from straight up from Scripture. We know that God made the Noahic covenant with animals in Genesis. That when He made His promise to Noah and his descendants, He included the animals. We know that that Jonah, when he's sulking at the end of his book because God is compassionate toward the Ninevites, he's compassionate toward the people and the animals. We know if we take Isaiah literally, we may not, but we know that the new creation includes the lion lying down with the lamb, and the wolf with the lamb, and the boy leading them. So most scholars, I think, do believe that there will be animals in the new creation, and we can actually hope that they might be our pets, but we don't know. And so there will be animals. I think that is the most important thing. That the presence of animals in the new creation is a reflection of their presence in Eden, when God established a special connection between Adam and the animals by having Adam name the animals, as I say in the article, and also in doing that, seeing that Adam was like the animals in some way, but not like enough in order to find a suitable companion. And that's a relationship that Adam did not have with any of the other elements of God's creation. I think there's a lot packed into that simple narrative.
Definitely horses, since there's going to be riding, right? Yes, if there are horsemen, there must be horses. So we're thankful for that. All right. I know you guys are listening right now, and you have a lot to say weighing in on this. So, the text line's always open, 877-933-2484. Karen, let's touch on the chaplaincy issue. There is a lot of grief experienced when we lose a pet we love. And so that is one subject matter area. A chaplain who is who believes they are serving in some sort of spiritual capacity on behalf of animals, maybe is a different thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, animals are like humans in the sense that they are animated. They have the breath of life in them. And of course, there are different religious views about what that means. And probably most of those are not the same as the Christian view. But I think that the idea of the grief that we experience at the death of animals, whether we are Christians or not, points to the bigger questions about how much we hate death and how much we want death to be overcome, and how that points to that is exactly what God did in sending Jesus Christ, is He defeated death. And we have all these questions, even as Christians, let alone people who aren't Christians, about what the end of our physical life means, whether we're humans or animals. And so I see that our love and grief that we experience at the death of a pet as just an expression of all of these questions that we have about what it means to be human and what it means to have eternal life.
So good. I just thoroughly appreciate and enjoy you. I love what you write and the way you write. I love the way you encourage us to be readers. Thank you for your appreciation for literature and the way that you are cultivating a love of literature in us as well. Karen, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Carmen.
Absolutely. You can connect directly with Karen at KarenSwallowPrior.com. She's got a Substack. Her blog is called The Priory. All right, we only have like a minute left together today. I can't believe that our conversation has gone so quickly. What a joy it has been to be with you today. Thank you so much for including me in your day. It's total privilege. I mean, I recognize that you are literally spending the resource of your time in order for us to be together. And so thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Would you be praying with me about Faith Radio's upcoming fundraiser? It is spring fundraising time. Next week, each morning, we're going to be celebrating what God is doing through the ministry of Faith Radio, the impact and influence it's having in your life, and then through your gifts around the world. This is listener-supported radio. It's also now listener-supported digital media. And so in order not only to keep the ministry strong, but enable us to be able to say yes when God says, hey, here's a new media opportunity or a new community I'd like for you to be broadcasting in, like most recently, Billings, Montana. We want to be able to say yes. And in order for us to be able to say yes, we need you to say yes to financially coming alongside us in this ministry. So be praying in advance for what God is going to be asking you to give during our spring fundraiser. You can actually always give online at myfaithradio.com or by texting the word give to 877-933-2484. Have a great day and God bless. Thanks for listening to Mornings with Carmen LaBerge. Podcasts like this are available because of your support. If it's important to you to hear things that encourage your faith, click the link in the show notes to give now. And thanks.